Spring is always a very uneven time in my writing life. The new season tends to fill me with energy and I want to get lots of words down on paper, get loads of books ready for publication, but the better weather always draws me outside, so there are always lots of distractions. I want to be taking photos and going walking and just spending as much time away from my desk as possible. But despite that, I do have some big plans for the coming season, and as winter turns into spring, I thought we would chat about those today. Now first, let's recap the season's just gone. Winter was an incredibly productive writing time for me. Over the first 3 months of the year, I wrote more than 120,000 words. Now, I would love to say that every single one of those is going to be published, but I did have a bit of a false start. I wrote about 60,000 words of a book that is now on hold and may not be published. I was working from a very solid outline, but I felt that particular book was just falling a bit flat. And I kept thinking of more interesting ways I could use certain elements of the story, but they meant completely starting over. So I have put that book to the side for now, possibly permanently, and I am currently coming close to the end of a draft of another book. Now this is the follow-up to The Last Archdruid, which came out last year. It is called The Goldstone Tower. I have just passed 60,000 words in the draft. The original first draft was supposed to be about 80,000 words. I think it's probably going to be over 90 at this point. There is more plot and story here than I thought there was going to be, but I don't mind that too much because this is the second book in a series. So as I said, winter was incredibly productive. I wrote and wrote and wrote faster than I have ever written before, certainly over such a long period of time. But now, of course, I am looking ahead to spring. Now first up, of course, I do want to finish The Goldstone Tower. I have those last 20 or 30,000 words to write. I would really like to finish them by the end of April. It is about the 11th as I film this, so time is growing ever shorter. I initially thought this draft might be finished by the end of March, then I was aiming for the middle of April. The deadline is getting pushed further and further back, as these things often do. But even if I do finish by the end of April, I will still have written the first draft in 2.5 months. And I've also been working and writing my serial fiction and producing these videos nearly every week, so I'm very happy with that speed. But that only brings me until the end of April, so what happens after that? My next goal is actually to draft yet another book. This is Rogue Soul, and it is the third book in my Cyberpunk Eidolon Division trilogy. Now, the first 2 books in this series came out a couple of years apart, and there is going to be another 2-year gap between the second and third books. They are long books, they are very complicated, and they really do take it out of me when I write them. They are not as fun and light-hearted as a lot of my fantasy, and I really do love writing them, but I kind of have to psych myself up for it. Now I have a certain amount of planning already done for Rogue Soul, and I think I have written about the first half of the first chapter, but this is a book that I really want finished this year. My aim is to publish it either by the end of 2023 or in very early 2024. So whilst it feels like there's a lot of the year left, I really do need to get a move on. I am not, however, planning to draft the entire thing this spring. I am probably going to spend May on it, maybe only the first half of May, I'm not sure yet. My goal really is to write, say, the first 20,000 words, at which point I will have to put it aside because then it is time to go back to the Goldstone Tower. Now there's going to be a fairly tight turnaround on this one because I would like to publish it in the summer. I have July in my head, that might be a bit ambitious. But then again, I originally had May or June planned, so the deadlines have got pushed further and further back anyway, and July would be a good compromise. But that does mean that I need to definitely spend June editing and probably quite a bit of May as well. The reason I have Rogue Soul in there is that I need to take a break between finishing the draft of the Goldstone Tower and moving into the edits. The longer the break I can take, the better. At this point, that really depends on how quickly I finish the first draft. It might be at a minimum a break of 2 weeks, but I would really like it to be more like 3 or 4. And then of course we get into the editing process. Now this is something that I actually enjoy more than I used to do. I used to hate editing my work. It really just felt like pulling teeth. But I found new ways of tracking my progress when editing and working through it at a steady pace. And I really don't hate it as much as I used to. I've said in a few vlogs that I don't think the Goldstone Tower is going to take heavy structural editing. That is largely still true. Where I get tripped up is always on the same few things: character motivation and little details of backstory and world building and how they all need weaving together. No matter how well I plan a book, I can never decide all these things in advance. They always evolve and become richer as I draft the book. But that means that I need to go back, usually into the first half, and start planting the seeds of things that grow in the second half of the book. And I really did think I knew quite a lot of the backstory of the Goldstone Tower. I spent a lot of time planning it as I went along, but there is still a lot to go back and seed in earlier on. I've kind of had to accept that this is just part of my writing process, and I don't think I'm ever going to get away from it. The way I build richer and deeper books is by developing more detail as I go along. And I have tried to do this in outlining, but it just doesn't work for me, which is one of the reasons that book I was talking about from the start of the year didn't work. It was very heavily outlined and it wasn't giving me the space to develop those details as I went along, which meant it felt very flat. Now, aside from writing, I don't have too many goals for the spring. I am really focused on getting the Goldstone Tower finished. Once it's done, I have plans to write a couple of different long novellas in the same world, one a prequel and one a sequel. And of course, there is Rogue Soul to draft and edit and release later in the year. So my 2023 is looking quite packed already. I am doing my best to keep other projects at bay. There are always a good dozen other books I could be writing, but I simply don't have the time right now, and I'm trying to maintain my focus. I do have some YouTube plans. I will be continuing to vlog and make updates and chats for this channel, but there's also something else I would like to try which will be appearing elsewhere. I'm not going to say too much about that at this point because it has not got off the ground, but I will let you know if that ever comes to fruition. So I would love to know what writing plans you are making for the coming season. I know a lot of people in the writing community do plan quarterly. For me, I did start making these plans at the start of April, but it was only once spring really started to emerge here that it felt like the right time to talk about them. So please let me know what you are planning down in the comments. I will be back soon with another video. In the meantime, keep writing everyone, and I'll see you next time.